The wind cut through my coat like it had a grudge. February in Wyoming territory don't forgive much. And that night it wasn't in a forgiving mood. Temperature sat around 15 below, maybe colder. The kind of cold that turns spit to ice before it hits the ground. I was checking the fence line one last time before full dark when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Thought it was a coyote at first. Then I saw the blood trail in the snow. She was maybe 30 yards out crawling. A child dragging something wrapped in oilskin. And her fingers locked around it so tight I don't think she could have let go if she'd wanted to. Her coat was torn clear through at the shoulder. When she reached the fence post, she looked up at me. Her face was all purple and white, frostbite claiming the edges. He said, "I ain't real without the paper," she whispered. "Am I real, mister?" I lifted her. That's when I saw it. A brand on her shoulder blade. The letter B, same mark Harlan Blackwood used on his cattle. The smell of burnt flesh still clung to her skin under the cold. I carried her toward the cabin. Behind me, a lantern bobbed up the trail through the trees. Someone was coming for her. I kicked the cabin door shut behind me and set her by the fire. She didn't let go of that oilskin pouch. Her breath came shallow and quick, the kind of breathing that says the body's about done fighting. I grabbed the kettle off the hook and poured warm water into a tin cup. Not hot. Hot would have shocked her system. Just warm enough to remind her blood it had work to do. The coat I wrapped around her had been my daughter's. Eliza, dead 3 years now. Scarlet fever. The wool still smelled faintly of lavender soap, the kind my wife used to make before she passed. The girl didn't ask questions, just pulled it tight and stared at the flames like they were the first true thing she'd seen in a long time. "Can you drink?" I asked. She nodded. I held the cup to her lips. Her hand shook too bad to manage it herself. She took 3 small sips, then turned her head away. I set the cup down and fed another log to the fire. The wood cracked and popped, sparks climbing toward the chimney. Outside, the wind howled like it was trying to get in. I didn't ask her name yet. Didn't ask where she'd come from or why. A man learns living alone as long as I have that silence is sometimes the kindest thing you can offer. I pulled a chair close and sat where she could see me, but not so close I'd crowd her. She was watching me now, eyes flicking between my face and the rifle propped against the wall. "You're safe here," I said. "No biote's going to hurt you." She didn't believe me. I could see that plain enough, but she was too tired to run, so she just sat there clutching that pouch like it was the only proof she'd ever lived. An hour passed, maybe 2. The fire burned steady. I heated broth from the pot I'd made that morning. Venison and wild onion, nothing fancy. The smell filled the cabin, rich and earthy. I poured some into a bowl and set it on the floor beside her. She stared at it a long time before she touched it. When she finally did, she ate slow, like someone who'd learned the hard way that food could be taken back. I was mending a harness strap when she spoke again. "My name's Lyra," she said. Her voice was small but steady. "Lee Blackwood." Blackwood? I knew that name. Everybody in Pinecrest knew Harlan Blackwood. Owned the land office, held notes on half the businesses in town, a man with money and no shortage of ways to use it. I'd borrowed $340 from his bank last fall to buy a winter feed for the horses. The note came due in April. "You as kin?" I asked his niece. She looked down at the pouch in her lap. "My daddy died in October. Roundup accident. After that, Uncle Harlan said I had to come live with him. And now you're here." "Yes, sir." I didn't press. A child doesn't run through a blizzard at night unless staying put is worse. I stood and pulled a blanket from the shelf, shook it out, and draped it over the back of the chair. "You can sleep there tonight," I said, nodding toward the corner where I kept a spare bedroll. "I'll be right here if you need anything." She nodded, but she didn't move toward the bedroll, just sat there, staring at the fire. After a while, her head started to droop. Her fingers loosened on the pouch. I thought she might be asleep. Then her eyes snapped open again, wide and afraid. "He's coming," she whispered. "Who?" "Uncle Harlan. He always comes." As if the words had summoned him, I heard it. The thud of a fist against the cabin door. 3 heavy blows, then a voice cutting through the wind. "Elias Thorne, open this door." I stood. The girl pulled the coat tighter around herself. I could see the fear in her eyes, the way her whole body went rigid. I picked up the rifle and checked the load. It was ready. It had been ready for years. "Stay by the fire," I told her. I crossed to the door and opened it just wide enough to see out. Harlan Blackwood stood on the other side, his face red from cold and rage. He was a tall man, well-dressed, even out here in the snow, his coat lined with fur. Behind him, the lantern light made his shadow stretch long and crooked across the ground. "That's my niece you got in there," he said. "That's a child," I said. "And she's hurt. She's a runaway. I'm her legal guardian." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Got the judge's signature right here. Now step aside or I'll be back in the morning with the marshal." I looked at him a long time. Then I said, "Bring him." I shut the door. Outside, Harlan Blackwood cursed once, loud and sharp. Then I heard his boots crunching back through the snow. The lantern light faded. I set the rifle down and turned back to the fire. Lyra was asleep finally, still holding that oilskin pouch like a rosary. I sat in the chair and watched the flames. My hands remembered this, feeding a child, keeping them warm, listening for their breath in the dark. I knew then someone was coming for her, and I knew I wasn't going to let her go. A week passed before Harlan made good on his threat. In that time, Lee slept more than she spoke. She'd wake with nightmares, gasping, and I'd sit with her until the fear passed. During the day, she helped with small things, feeding the horses, gathering eggs from the 3 hens I kept. She moved careful like someone who'd learned that drawing attention was dangerous. The bruises on her neck faded from purple to yellow. The whip marks healed into thin pink lines. But the brand didn't fade. It sat there on her shoulder blade, raised and angry. The letter B burned deep. I didn't ask about it. Didn't need to. A man who'd mark a child like livestock had already told me everything I needed to know about his character. On the 8th day, I hitched the mule to the sled and told Lyra we were going into town. She went pale. "He'll be there," she said. "I know, but Doc Mills needs to see those injuries, and you need proper clothes." The coat she'd arrived in was ruined, the fabric stiff with dried blood and frozen mud. She didn't argue, just climbed onto the sled and pulled my daughter's coat tight around her shoulders. We rode in silence, the runners hissing over packed snow. The sky was gray and low, threatening more weather. By the time we reached Pinecrest, my beard was white with frost. The town wasn't much. A main street lined with false front buildings, a church at one end, a saloon at the other. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys, the smell of burning pine and coal mixing with the sharper scent of the blacksmith's forge. I pulled the mule to a stop in front of Doc Mills's office, a narrow building wedged between the dry goods store and the land office. We didn't make it to the door. Well, look what the snow dragged back. Harlan Blackwood stood on the church steps 20 yards away. He wasn't alone. A small crowd had gathered after Sunday service. Agnes Harlow from the dry goods store, the blacksmith, a handful of ranch hands, the preacher. They all turned to look. Harlan walked toward us, his boots crunching loud in the quiet. He was dressed fine as always, a wool coat with brass buttons, a hat that probably cost more than I made in a month. He stopped 10 feet from the sled and pointed at Lee. "That man," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "is holding my niece against her will. Kidnapped her right out of my home." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Agnes Harlow frown. The blacksmith shook his head. A few others nodded along with Harlan. They owed him money. They'd nod along with whatever he said. "That true, Elias?" the blacksmith called out. I climbed down from the sled. Lyra stayed where she was, small and silent under the coat. "She came to my door half frozen," I said. "I gave her food and shelter. That's not kidnapping. That's Christian duty." "Christian duty." Harlan laughed, but there wasn't any warmth in it. "You think hiding a child from her lawful guardian is Christian? You think defying a judge's order is righteous?" He pulled the paper from his coat again and held it up. "This here says I'm her guardian. Says I have legal custody until she comes of age. You want to argue with the territorial judge, Elias? You want to argue with the law?" I didn't answer. Just stood there, boots planted in the snow, hands loose at my sides. "Didn't think so." Harlan folded the paper and tucked it away. "Now bring her down from that sled. She's coming home with me." "No." The word came from Lee, quiet but clear. She climbed down from the sled before I could stop her. Stood there in the snow facing her uncle. She barely came up to his chest. "I ain't going back," she said. Harlan's face went hard. "You'll do what you're told, girl." "No, sir, I won't." For a moment, I thought he might strike her right there in the street. His hand twitched, but he caught himself, remembered the crowd watching. Instead, he smiled. It was worse than the anger. "We'll see about that." He turned to address the onlookers. "This man is in violation of the law. I'll be speaking to Deputy Langford this afternoon. By tomorrow, we'll have this matter sorted proper." He looked back at me. "You think you're doing her a favor, Elias? You're just making it harder for both of you." He walked away back toward the land office. The crowd began to break up, folks drifting back to their wagons and Sunday dinners. A few cast glances our way, some sympathetic, others uncertain. Agnes Harlow lingered on the store, her face troubled. She caught my eye and nodded once, slow and deliberate. Then she went inside. I took Lyra's arm, gentle, and guided her toward Doc Mills's door. She was shaking, not from cold this time. Doc Mills was a lean man with gray in his beard and steady hands. He'd been a field surgeon during the war, seen things that left shadows in his eyes, but he was kind. He examined Lyra in the back room while I waited by the stove, the smell of carbolic soap and camphor thick in the air. When he came out, his face was grim. "That brand is 2 weeks old, maybe 3, he said quietly. "The whip marks are older. There's scarring on her back that goes back months." He paused. "This isn't discipline, Elias. This is livestock treatment. Can you document it?" "I already have. Photographs, measurements, notes. I'll lock it all in my safe." He glanced toward the back rooms here. "But you need to understand something. Harlan has the law on his side. A guardian can discipline a child as he sees fit. There's no statute against it. Not out here. Then the law is broken." "Maybe so, but it's still the law." Doc Mills poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot on the stove and handed me one. "You prepared for what's coming?" "I don't have much choice." "You do?" "You could put her on the next stage east. Send her to relatives if she's got any. She doesn't. Then you're in for a fight." I drank the coffee. It was bitter and too hot, but I needed something to do with my hands. Through the window, I could see the land office across the street. Harlan was visible through the glass talking to another man. They both looked our way. "Let them come," I said. Doc Mills sighed. "You're a stubborn man, Elias Thorne." "So I've been told." When Lee came out, Doc had given her a clean dress from the charity box the church kept. It was too big, but she'd rolled the sleeves. She looked like a child again, not a ghost. Doc knelt down to her level. "You're going to be fine," he said. "But if you ever need help, you come straight here. Don't matter what time it is. Understand?" She nodded. We left through the back door. I didn't want to walk past the land office again. We took the long way around, past the blacksmith's forge, where the fire roared and the air smelled of hot metal and coal smoke. When we reached the sled, Deputy Nate Langford was waiting. He was young, maybe 35, with a badge pinned to his coat and an apologetic look on his face. He held a folded paper in his hand. "Elias," he said, "I'm sorry, but I got to serve you this." He handed me the paper. I opened it. The words were legal and formal, but the meaning was plain enough. Harlan Blackwood was calling in my debt. $340 due by the 1st of May, 6 weeks from now. "If you can't pay," Deputy Langford said quietly, "he can seize your property, the ranch, the horses, everything." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Lyra watched with wide eyes. "Anything else?" I asked. The deputy hesitated. Then he pulled out a second paper. "He's also filed a complaint. Says you're harboring a runaway. If I find cause to believe it, I'm obliged to bring her back to him. You going to do that?" He looked at Lyra, looked at me, then he shook his head slow. "Not today, but Elias, he's not going to let this go. You know that, don't you?" "I know." The deputy tipped his hat and walked away. I climbed onto the sled. Lyra climbed up beside me. We rode out of town in silence, the runners cutting through snow that had started to fall again. By the time we reached the ranch, it was dark. I unhitched the mule and fed the horses. Lyra sat by the fire, staring at the flames. After a while, she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For bringing trouble." I sat down across from her. "You didn't bring trouble. Trouble found you. That's different." She looked at the oilskin pouch still sitting on the shelf where she'd left it. "That paper he keeps talking about. The judge's order." "What about it?" "It's a lie." She said, "My daddy's will says I inherit his ranch when I turn 12. That's in July. Uncle Harlan wants the land before then. If I'm gone, he gets it all." I understood then. It wasn't about guardianship. It was about $12,000 in cattle and grazing rights. It was about greed. "He won't get it," I said. "How do you know?" "Because I gave you my word you'd be safe, and I don't break my word." She looked at me for a long time. Then finally, she nodded. Outside, the wind picked up. I could hear it howling around the eaves, rattling the shutters. Winter wasn't done with us yet. Neither was Harlan Blackwood. Agnes Harlow showed up 2 days later, riding a mule with a basket strapped to the saddle. The smell of fresh bread reached me before she did, yeast and butter still warm from the oven. She was a sturdy woman around 60 with gray hair pinned tight and eyes that didn't miss much. She'd lost her husband to pneumonia 5 years back and her only son to the war 20 years before that. She ran the dry goods store alone and took nonsense from nobody. "Figured you could use provisions," she said, climbing down. "And company that don't come with a badge or a threat." I took the basket. Inside were 2 loaves of bread, a jar of preserves, coffee, and a small sack of cornmeal. "You didn't have to do this." "I know I didn't." She looked toward the cabin. The girl inside. She is good. I want to meet her. Lyra was at the table working through the letters I'd been teaching her. She could read some already. Her father had seen to that, but her schooling had stopped when he died. She looked up when Agnes came in wary. "Don't worry, child," Agnes said. "I'm not here to drag you anywhere." She set a smaller bundle on the table wrapped in brown paper. "Brought you something." Lyra unwrapped it slowly. Inside were 3 dresses, all patched but clean, and a pair of boots only slightly too big. Her eyes went wide. "I can't pay for these," she said quietly. "Didn't ask you to. These were donated to the church charity box. Nobody's using them." Agnes pulled out a chair and sat down. "Now, I want to hear your side of things. Not what Harlan says. Not what the town's whispering. You tell me." Lyra glanced at me. I nodded. She took a breath and started talking. She told it plain. How her father had died in October when his horse threw him during Roundup. How the will said she'd inherit the ranch, 300 head of cattle, good grazing land, water rights when she turned 12. How Harlan had come for her the day after the funeral claiming guardianship. How the first month hadn't been so bad. But then she'd overheard him talking to a man from Cheyenne about selling her father's land. When she'd asked about it, he'd told her to mind her business. "That's when he started locking me in the barn at night," she said. Her voice stayed steady, but her hands twisted the fabric of her dress. Agnes's face went hard. "The brand." Lyra pulled the collar of her dress aside. The bee was still angry red against her skin. "He said I was property now, same as his cattle." Agnes closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, they were wet. "Lord, forgive me, but I hope that man rots." "Agnes," I started. "Don't Agnes me, Elias Thorne. I've known Harlan Blackwood for 15 years. He's a hard man. Always has been." But I never thought she stopped, collected herself. "His daughter died 3 years back. Childbirth, the baby, too. He blamed her for being weak. Said women were too fragile for this country." She looked at Lee. "I think he's been punishing her through you." The cabin fell quiet except for the fire crackling and the wind whispering under the door. Outside, I could hear the horses moving in the corral, their hooves crunching through crusted snow. Agnes stood. "I deliver bread to the land office every Wednesday. Harlan is always there going through files." She looked at me. "If he's planning something, there will be paperwork. I can keep my eyes open. That could put you in danger. I'm an old woman running a store. Nobody pays attention to old women." She pulled her coat tighter. "Besides, my store is mortgaged to his bank, too. He comes after you. He might come after me next. I'd rather see trouble coming." She left before the sun set, riding back toward town through the gray afternoon light. After she was gone, Lee tried on the dresses. They fit well enough. She stood by the window in one of them, dark blue with white buttons, and watched the snow beginning to fall again. "Why is she helping us?" she asked. "Because it's right. Lots of people know what's right. They don't all help." She wasn't wrong. I'd seen plenty of folks in town look away when they passed us on the street. Seen them duck into doorways to avoid conversation. Fear does that. Fear of debt, fear of power, fear of standing alone. "Agnes is different," I said. "She buried a son and a husband. Once you've lost that much, you stop being afraid of men like Harlan." Lyra thought about that. Then she asked, "Are you afraid?" I was mending a bridle, the leather stiff and cracked from cold. The smell of neatsfoot oil filled the cabin as I worked it into the straps. I'm afraid of failing you, I said. I'm afraid of not being strong enough or smart enough when it matters. But I'm not afraid of Harlan. Why not? Because I've already lost the things I love most. There's not much he can take from me that hasn't already been taken. She came and sat across from me, watched me work the leather for a while. Then she said, I found her coat, the one you gave me that first night. There was a name sewn inside, Eliza. I didn't look up, just kept working the oil into the bridle. My daughter. What happened to her? Scarlet fever. 3 years ago, she was 9. I set the bridle aside. We lived 40 miles from the nearest doctor back then. By the time I got her to town, it was too late. I'm sorry. So am I. She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. It was small and warm and alive. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she pulled back and picked up the book we'd been reading, a collection of McGuffey's readers I'd kept from Eliza's schooling. Will you teach me the next lesson? She asked. We worked until the light failed. She was a quick study, sounding out words carefully, her left hand tracing the lines on the page. When she stumbled, I'd help her. When she got it right, I'd nod. It was a small thing teaching a child to read. But out here in the middle of winter, with the world pressing in from all sides, it felt like the only thing that mattered. By the time we finished, full dark had fallen. I lit the lamp and started supper. Salt pork and beans, nothing fancy. Lee set the table without being asked. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that comes when two people start to trust each other. After supper, she went to the shelf and took down the oilskin pouch. She opened it carefully and pulled out a folded paper, yellowed and creased. She handed it to me. My daddy's will, she said. It's the only proof I got. Uncle Harlan tried to take it, but I hid it in the barn. That's why I ran. He figured out where it was. I unfolded it. The handwriting was careful and clear. It laid out everything, the land, the cattle, the water rights, all to be held in trust until Lee reached the age of 12, at which point it would pass to her free and clear. It was witnessed and notarized legal. He needs this gone, I said. Without it, he can claim there was no will. That you're just an orphan with no claim. That's why I can't let him have it. I folded the paper and handed it back. Then we keep it safe and come July, you take what's yours. She put it back in the pouch and set it on the shelf. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire burned warm. We sat together in the lamplight. And for a little while, the world outside didn't matter. But I knew it wouldn't last. Men like Harlan don't give up. They just change tactics. And somewhere out there in the dark, he was planning his next move. March came in cold and mean. The snow turned to ice, then back to snow, then to a slush that froze hard at night and made every step treacherous. The horses grew shaggy and ill-tempered. The chickens stopped laying, and Deputy Nate Langford rode up to the cabin with a paper that might as well have been a death warrant. He didn't dismount, just sat his horse and held out the folded document, his breath steaming in the grey morning air. Eviction notice, he said. Harlan called in your debt. $340 due by the 1st of May. If you can't pay, the ranch goes to the bank. I took the paper. The words were formal and cold. Legal theft dressed up in official language. 6 weeks. I'm sorry, Elias. I tried to talk him out of it. The deputy's face was troubled, but he owns the note and the law's on his side. Law seems to be on his side a lot lately. Langford looked away. I don't like it either, but I wear a badge. I enforce what's written, not what's fair. You ever wonder if there's a difference? He didn't answer, just turned his horse and rode back toward town, the animal's hooves breaking through the crust of ice with each step. The sound echoed in the stillness long after he disappeared into the trees. Inside, Lyra was feeding kindling to the fire. She looked up when I came in, saw my face, and went still. What happened? I told her, watched the color drain from her cheeks as she understood what it meant. No ranch meant no place to keep her. No place to keep her meant Harlan won. How much do you have? She asked. $70. Maybe 80 if I sell the mule and 2 of the horses. That's not enough. No, it's not. She stood there small and fierce in one of Agnes's hand-'em-down dresses. Her hands balled into fists. It's my fault. If I hadn't come here, stop. I crossed to her, knelt down. So, we were eye to eye. You didn't bring this. Harlan did. He's the one twisting the law to suit himself. You're just a child trying to survive. But you're going to lose everything because of me. I already lost everything that mattered 3 years ago when Eliza died. I put a hand on her shoulder. This ranch is just wooden land. You're alive. There's no choice to make here. She started to cry, then quiet sobs that shook her whole body. I pulled her close and let her cry it out. The smell of wood smoke clung to her hair. Outside, a crow called, harsh and lonely. When she'd calmed, I made us coffee, weak because supplies were running low, and we sat by the fire. I had 2 choices, and neither was good. I could try to raise the money, which was near impossible. Or I could take Lyra and run, head west to Oregon Territory, where Harlan's reach didn't extend. But running meant looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives. Meant teaching her that might makes right, that powerful men always win. I couldn't do that, wouldn't. We fight. I said, how? I don't know yet, but Agnes is watching. Doc has evidence, and somewhere Harlan has a weak spot. Every man does. 3 days later, Harlan called a town meeting. Not official business, just an invitation delivered by hand to every property owner in Pinecrest. The meeting would be held at the church Sunday after service. The subject, community concerns regarding the protection of minors. Agnes came out to warn me. It's a trap, she said, standing in my doorway with snow melting off her shawl. He's going to paint you as a criminal in front of everyone. Get them on his side before any of this goes to a real court. I'm going anyway. I figured you'd say that. She sighed. Then I'm going too, and I'm bringing anyone who listened to reason. Sunday came clear and cold. The sky was that hard blue you only see in winter, and the sunlight off the snow was bright enough to hurt. I dressed in my best shirt, which wasn't saying much, and hitched the mule to the sled. Lyra wore the blue dress Agnes had brought, and I wrapped Eliza's coat around her shoulders. You don't have to come, I told her. Yes, I do. This is about me. I should be there. We rode into town in silence. The church was already full when we arrived. Folks packed into the pews, their voices a low murmur that stopped when we walked through the door. I felt every eye on us. Some sympathetic, most uncertain, a few openly hostile. Harlan stood at the front next to the preacher's pulpit. He was dressed like a politician, black suit, white shirt, string tie. He looked prosperous and respectable. Everything I wasn't. When he saw us, he smiled. Good of you to come, Elias. And you brought the girl. Even better. He addressed the crowd. Folks, thank you for gathering. I know it's cold and you've got work waiting, but this concerns all of us. It concerns the rule of law in this territory. He let that hang in the air. Then he pulled out the guardianship paper and held it up. This document signed by Judge Hargrove himself names me as Lee Blackwood's legal guardian. My brother, God rest him, died without proper provision for his daughter. As her only living relative, it falls to me to raise her to see to her education and welfare. He paused. But Mr. Thorne has decided the law doesn't apply to him. He's harboring a minor against her guardian's wishes. That's kidnapping, plain and simple. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw heads nodding. Harlan had them. Now, I'm a patient man, he continued. I've tried reasoning with Elias. I've sent the deputy with proper notice, but he refuses to comply, and that puts all of us at risk. Because if one man can ignore the law, what's to stop others? What's to stop chaos? He turned to look at me. I don't want trouble, Elias. I just want my niece returned to her rightful home. Is that so much to ask? The church was silent. Everyone waited. I could feel Lee trembling beside me. I stood and stepped into the aisle. You want to talk about law? I said, let's talk about it. You brand a child like cattle. That lawful? You lock her in a barn at night. That proper guardianship? You forge documents to steal her inheritance. That righteous gasps. Harlan's face went red. That slander. It's truth. I looked at the crowd. Doc Mills's got photographs of what he did to her. Photographs of the brand on her shoulder, the whip marks on her back. Any of you want to see them? The discipline of a child is a guardian's right. Harlan's voice rose. You don't have children, Elias. You don't understand what it takes to raise a stubborn girl in this country. I had a daughter. She died before you could teach me how to beat her into submission. The words came out harder than I'd meant them. The church went dead quiet. I saw Agnes in the third row, her eyes shining. Saw Doc Mills near the back, arms crossed. Saw Deputy Langford by the door, his face troubled. Harlan recovered quickly. I grieve for your loss, Elias. I truly do. But your pain doesn't give you the right to steal another man's kin. He turned back to the crowd. He owes my bank $340. Come May, he'll lose his land. Is that the kind of man you want raising a child, a debtor, a thief? Someone in the crowd called out, how'd he come to owe you that money, Harlan? It was the blacksmith, a big man with soot-stained hands. Harlan blinked. What? Just wondering how a man who don't borrow much suddenly owes you a debt right when he takes in your niece. Seems convenient. I don't appreciate your tone, and I don't appreciate you using the law like a club, the blacksmith said. Elias Thorne's been in this valley longer than most of us. Never caused trouble, never asked for much. Now you're saying he's a criminal because he gave shelter to a freezing child. Murmurs again, but this time they were different. Uncertain, Harlan's jaw tightened. The law is clear. If he doesn't return, Lee, by week's end, I'll have the marshal brought in from Cheyenne. This isn't a negotiation. He turned and walked out, his boots loud on the wooden floor. The crowd began to break up, folks filing out in small groups, talking in low voices. Agnes came over, squeezed my arm. Doc Mills nodded. Deputy Langford approached slowly. He's not bluffing about the marshal, he said quietly. Once that happens, it's out of my hands. I know, Elias. He looked at Lyra, then back at me. The law ain't always just, but it's all we got. Without it, we're just animals. And when the law protects animals over children, what then? He had no answer. He left. Outside, the sun was already sinking. The temperature was dropping fast, the way it does in March. Winter's last cruel joke. Lee and I climbed onto the sled. As we pulled away, I saw Harlan standing outside the land office watching us. Even from a distance, I could see the rage in his posture. He'd expected to win today. Expected the town to turn against me. It hadn't quite worked, but he'd drawn the lines clear. Come May, I'd lose the ranch, and without the ranch, I'd have no ground to stand on. Lyra was quiet on the ride home. When we reached the cabin, she went straight to the shelf and took down the oilskin pouch. She held it for a long time, staring at it. "What if I gave him the land?" She said, "What if I just signed it over?" "Then he'd leave you alone." "No, but that land is yours. Your father worked himself to death to build it. You don't hand it over to a man who'd rather burn you than let you have it." "Then what do we do?" I looked out the window. The sun was gone, the sky fading to deep purple. Stars were beginning to show, cold and distant. "We wait," I said. "And we hope Agnes finds something we can use." But hope felt thin that night. Thin as the ice forming on the water bucket. Thin as the thread holding my whole life together. April crept in with mud and cold rain. The snow didn't melt so much as rot away, leaving the ground soft and treacherous. The horses sank to their fetlocks in the muck. Water dripped from the cabin eaves in an endless rhythm that sounded like a clock counting down. I sold 2 horses to a rancher passing through. Got $40 for the pair. Sold the mule for 20 more. That gave me 140 total, still 200 short. The 1st of May was 3 weeks away. Lyra had gone quiet. Not the frightened quiet of when she first arrived, but something harder. Determined. She worked alongside me without complaint, feeding the remaining horses, hauling water from the creek, chopping kindling. Her hands got rough and calloused. She didn't ask about the dead anymore. Didn't talk much at all. One afternoon, I found her in the corner of the cabin where I kept my tools. She had Eliza's old McGuffey's reader open on her lap, but she wasn't reading. She was copying words onto a scrap of paper, practicing her letters. Her left hand moved carefully across the page, forming each letter with precision. "What are you working on?" I asked. She showed me. It was her name, written over and over. Lee Blackwood. Lyra Blackwood. Lyra Blackwood. The letters were neat and clear, all slanting slightly to the left the way a left-handed person's writing does. "Why?" I asked. "So I don't forget who I am," she said. "No matter what happens." I sat down next to her. The smell of wet earth and old wood filled the cabin. Outside, rain pattered on the tin roof, a sound both comforting and relentless. "You want to learn something?" I asked. She nodded. "Come with me." I took her out to the corral where I kept the last 3 horses, 2 mares, and a young stallion I'd been working with since fall. He was wild-caught, maybe 4 years old, with a black coat and white blaze down his face, mean as spit when I'd first roped him, but I'd been gentling him slow. Patience, not force. The stallion eyed us as we approached, ears back, nostrils flared. "This is trust," I said. "You can break a horse with whips and spurs. Make him fear you so much he'll obey. But that's not trust. That's just fear wearing a saddle." I climbed over the fence. The stallion tossed his head but didn't bolt. I moved slow, keeping my hands visible, talking low and steady. When I got close enough, I held out my palm. The stallion snorted, danced sideways, then finally stretched his neck and sniffed my hand. "You earn it," I said. "Little bit at a time. You show him you're not there to hurt him. Eventually, he stops expecting pain. That's when real work can begin." Lyra watched from the fence. "Can I try?" "You sure?" She nodded. I helped her over the rail. The stallion's ears pricked forward, curious. Lyra was smaller than me, less threatening. She held out her hand the way I had, palm up, fingers loose. "Talk to him," I said. "Use that voice you use when you're scared, the quiet one." She did. A whisper soft and steady. The same tone she'd used that first night when she asked if she was real. The stallion took a step closer, then another. Finally, he lowered his head and touched her palm with his muzzle. Lyra's face lit up. Not quite a smile. She didn't smile much yet, but something close. Something like hope. "He trusts you," I said. "How do you know?" "Because he's letting you be close. That's all trust is. Letting someone be close even when you're afraid they might hurt you." We worked with the horse for an hour until the rain picked up and drove us inside. That night, I made stew from the last of the salt pork. We ate by firelight, the cabin warm and dry despite the storm raging outside. Lee asked me about breaking horses, about how long it took, whether they ever forgot their fear. "Depends," I said. Some horses carry it their whole lives. Others let it go once they learn different. People are the same way. She thought about that. "Do you think I'll forget?" "Forget what?" "Being afraid." I set down my spoon. "I don't think you forget, but I think maybe you learn to carry it different. Learn that being afraid don't mean being broken." She nodded slowly. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was moving east toward town. 3 weeks' pay, she said. "I know. What happens if we can't pay?" "Then we figure out the next thing." "What's the next thing?" I didn't have an answer, so I just said, "We'll know when we get there." But the truth was, I didn't know. The money wasn't coming. The land would go to Harlan's bank. And without the ranch, I had no legal standing to keep Lyra. Deputy Langford had made that clear. A man without property was a vagrant. And vagrants didn't get to raise children. I lay awake that night listening to the rain and Lyra's breathing from the corner where she slept. The fire had burned down to coals. In the darkness, I could almost see Eliza's face. The way she'd looked the last time I'd seen her alive. Fever bright and asking for water. I'd failed her, ridden 40 miles to fetch a doctor who'd arrived too late. I couldn't fail again. But I was running out of options and time and hope. The rain fell harder. Somewhere in the darkness, a branch cracked and fell, and the sound of it felt like an ending. Agnes showed up on a Wednesday, 2 weeks before the debt came due. She rode through the mud with her skirt soaked to the knees and her face set hard. I knew before she said a word that she'd found something. "Land office," she said, climbing down from her horse. I was delivering bread like always. Harlan was arguing with his bank partner, man named Vaughn from Cheyenne. They didn't know I was in the back room. And inside, she sat by the fire and pulled a folded paper from inside her coat. The paper was damp but readable. I recognized the territorial seal at the top. "Orphan train contract," Agnes said. "Dated February 20th, says Lyra Blackwood. Voluntarily consents to relocation east for proper schooling and placement with a Christian family." It's signed by her, witnessed by Harlan. Lyra went pale. "I never signed that." "I know you didn't." Agnes pointed to the signature. "Look at the handwriting. It slants right. You're left-handed. Your writing slants left. I checked with Doc Mills. He had you write your name when he examined you. This signature is a forgery." I held the paper up to the light. The signature was neat and careful. Too neat. Practiced. "He's planning to put her on the train," I said. "Train leaves June 10th, Agnes confirmed. Once she's gone, he can claim abandonment. Say she ran off. Without her here to contest it, the inheritance defaults to him as next of kin." Lee's hands were shaking. "Can we show this to the deputy?" Agnes shook her head. "Not yet. Harlan will just say she signed it and forgot, or that she's lying to stay with Elias. We need more." "Like what?" "Like why he needs that land so badly right now." Agnes leaned forward. I heard him tell Vaughan the bank examiner's coming in June. He said something about covering the shortfall before anyone notices. Those were his exact words. The pieces started fitting together. A man doesn't forge documents and call in debts unless he's desperate. And Harlan was desperate. He's stealing from the bank, I said. That's my guess. Lee's inheritance is $12,000. If he can get that land and sell it quick, he can cover whatever he took before the examiner arrives. I looked at Lee. She sat very still, her face pale, but her eyes sharp. She understood what this meant. Her uncle wasn't just cruel. He was a thief using her to save himself. We need proof, I said. I'm working on it. But Elias, Agnes's voice dropped. This is dangerous. If Harlan finds out I'm looking, he'll move against me. My store is mortgaged to his bank, too. Then stop looking. I didn't say I was stopping. I said it's dangerous. She stood. I'll keep my ears open. You just keep that girl safe. She left before the sunset, riding back through the mud toward town. After she was gone, Lee came and stood beside me at the window. We watched the sky turn purple, the clouds breaking apart to show stars. He's going to win, isn't he? She said. Not if I can help it. But you can't pay the debt, and he's got the law on his side. I turned to face her. The law is just words on paper. What matters is what people choose to believe. And Agnes believes you. Doc believes you. Even the blacksmith starting to ask questions. That's 3 people against a whole town. 3 is more than 0. She looked up at me. Why are you doing this? You could just let me go. Save your ranch. The ranch is wood and nails. You're alive. But you already lost so much. That's exactly why I knelt down so we were eye level. When Eliza died, I thought I was done. Thought I'd just work this land until it buried me, too. Then you showed up half frozen, asking if you were real. And I remembered what it felt like to matter to someone. To have a reason to get up in the morning. I paused. You saved me, Lee. Least I can do is return the favor. Her eyes filled with tears. She threw her arms around my neck and held on tight. I held her back. This small, fierce girl who'd walked through a blizzard with nothing but a piece of paper and a question. Outside, the night settled in. The mud would freeze again by morning. The debt was still coming. Harlan was still planning. But for now, in this moment, we had each other. And sometimes that's enough to keep fighting. The next morning, I rode into town alone. Lyra wanted to come, but I told her to stay with the horses. What I was about to do didn't need witnesses. I found Harlan at the land office, sitting behind a desk covered in ledgers and papers. He looked up when I walked in, his face showing neither surprise nor concern. Come to beg, he asked. Come to make you an offer. I'm listening. You drop the debt. Give me clear title to my land. In exchange, I'll convince Lyra to sign over her inheritance. No fight, no fuss. Harlan leaned back in his chair. For a moment, I thought he might actually consider it. Then he smiled. No, he said, I'll have both. Your land and hers, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard him laugh, but I'd gotten what I came for. I'd seen his face when I mentioned the inheritance. Seen the hunger there, the desperation barely hidden. Agnes was right. He needed that money. Needed it bad. And desperate men make mistakes. The 1st of May came with a morning so clear it hurt to look at. The sky was blue and infinite. The kind of day that makes you believe in second chances. I didn't believe in them anymore. Deputy Langford arrived at noon with a surveyor and a clerk from the territorial office. They carried papers and measuring chains and expressions that said they'd done this before and would do it again. The law was the law, and the law didn't care about clear skies. "I'm sorry, Elias," Langford said. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "You got till sundown to clear out." I nodded. Lyra stood in the doorway behind me, her face pale but set. "We talked about this, knew it was coming, but knowing doesn't make it easier." "Where will you go?" the deputy asked. "Don't know yet." He looked past me at Lyra. "You know what happens next, don't you? Without property, you've got no legal standing to keep her. Harlan will file for immediate custody. I know you could make this easier for both of you." When I looked at him, then really looked at him, he was a young man trying to do his job, trying to enforce rules he didn't believe in because the alternative was chaos. But there's a difference between law and justice, and he knew it. I could see it in his eyes. "No," I said, "I couldn't." They measured and marked and wrote everything down in careful script. By mid-afternoon, the ranch officially belonged to Harlan Blackwood's bank. The cabin, the corral, the 3 remaining horses, all of it. The surveyor hammered a stake into the ground near the fence line and tied a red ribbon to it. The ribbon fluttered in the breeze like a flag of surrender. After they left, Lyra and I stood in the yard. The sun was warm on our faces. Birds sang in the cottonwoods. The world didn't care that we just lost everything. "What now?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Just stood there looking at the cabin I'd built with my own hands. The fence line I'd mended 100 times. The grave marker in the corner of the property where Eliza was buried. Leaving felt like dying. But staying meant watching Harlan take Lyra, and I'd burn the place down before I let that happen. "We pack what we can carry," I said, "and we figure out the rest as we go." Inside, I gathered Eliza's coat, the McGuffey's reader, a blanket, some tools. Lyra wrapped the oilskin pouch with her father's wool and a cloth, and tucked it inside her dress. We moved quiet and efficient like soldiers retreating from a battlefield. I was loading the saddlebags when I heard it. The church bell in town ringing hard and fast. Not the slow measured toll for service. This was urgent, alarmed. Lyra heard it, too. "What does that mean? Trouble or a call to gather?" I looked toward town. The sound carried clear across the distance, echoing off the hills. Agnes, I knew it in my bones. Agnes had found something, and she was calling the town to witness it. This was the move we'd been waiting for. "Stay here," I told Lee. "No," her voice was firm. "This is about me. I should be there." I wanted to argue, wanted to keep her safe, hidden, away from whatever was about to happen. But she was right. This was her fight as much as mine. "All right," I said. "But you stay close to me no matter what." We rode double on the last horse, moving fast through the mud-rutted road toward town. The bell kept ringing, insistent and loud. As we got closer, I could see people streaming toward the church from all directions. Ranch hands and shopkeepers, families and drifters. Whatever Agnes had done, she'd made sure everyone would see it. When we reached the church, the crowd was already thick. Folks parted to let us through, their faces curious and uncertain. At the front steps, Agnes stood holding a stack of papers. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with something between triumph and terror. Beside her stood Doc Mills, and beside him, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, stood Deputy Langford. Harlan was there too, standing near the church door. His face was red with rage. Agnes saw me and nodded. Then she raised her voice to carry across the crowd. "Folks," she said, "I got something to show you. Something you all need to see before this goes any further." She held up the papers. Even from a distance, I could see the territorial seal, official documents, the kind that told truths men like Harlan wanted buried. This here, Agnes said, is proof that Harlan Blackwood has been stealing from his own bank. $11,800 to be exact, and he's been using that little girl's inheritance to cover his tracks. The crowd erupted. Harlan lunged toward Agnes, but Doc Mills stepped between them. Deputy Langford's hand went to his gun. "You lying witch!" Harlan shouted. "Those are private bank records. You had no right." "I had every right," Agnes said. Her voice was steady. "Because you were about to ruin an innocent man and steal from a child to save your own skin." She looked at me, then at Lee, then back at the crowd. "Now, somebody better decide," she said. "If we're a town that protects children or a town that protects thieves." The bell had stopped ringing. In the silence that followed, every eye turned towards Harlan Blackwood, and I knew finally that we'd won. The preacher stepped forward, his Bible clutched in both hands. He was an old man, thin and gray, but his voice carried weight. "This is the house of God," he said. "And in this house we settle things according to his law, not man's greed." He looked at Harlan. "You stand accused of theft and fraud. You got anything to say?" Harlan's face had gone from red to white. His hand shook. "Those records are sealed." She had no authority. "Say, I had a key," Agnes said calmly. "You gave it to me yourself. Remember? Said I could use the back room to store dry goods. Overflow. You never thought an old woman delivering bread would be paying attention." She held up the papers again. "But I did. And I saw the ledgers, saw the withdrawals, saw how the numbers didn't match." Deputy Langford stepped forward. "Let me see those." Agnes handed them over. The deputy read slowly, his lips moving slightly. When he finished, he looked up at Harlan. "This true you've been taking from depositors' accounts?" "It was temporary. I was going to pay it back with Lee's inheritance." Doc Mills said, "That's why you needed her land. Why you forged the orphan train papers." The crowd pressed closer. I saw the blacksmith, the store clerks, ranch hands I recognized. They were listening now. Really listening. Harlan straightened his coat, trying to recover some dignity. "Even if that were true, which I'm not admitting, the girl's still my ward." The judge signed. "The judge signed based on your testimony that you were a fit guardian," Agnes interrupted. "But Doc Mills's got photographs of what you did to her. The brand, the whip marks. That sound like a fit guardian to you?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Angry murmurs. The preacher raised his hand for quiet. "There's a law in this territory. Old homestead law from the 50s back when judges were scarce. Says in cases of disputed guardianship, a town congregation can vote on placement provided there's evidence of harm or unfitness. That law is outdated." Harlan started. "That law is still on the books." Deputy Langford said quietly. "I checked last week." "Preacher's right." The preacher nodded. "Then we'll do this proper according to both God's law and territorial statute." He turned to Lee. "A child, do you wish to speak?" Lee had been standing beside me, silent and still. Now she stepped forward. She was small against the backdrop of the church, just a girl in a hand-me-down dress. But when she spoke, her voice didn't waver. "My name is Lyra Blackwood," she said. "My daddy died last October. Before he died, he wrote a will. It says, I inherit his ranch when I turn 12. That's 2 months from now." She reached into her dress and pulled out the oilskin pouch. Her hands were steady as she opened it and took out the yellowed paper. "This is the will. It's legal and witnessed. My uncle wanted it gone so he could take the land himself. She held up her left arm, showing the sleeve. Then she pulled it back, exposing the brand on her shoulder. The crowd gasped. Some of the women turned away. "He did this to me," she said. Said I was his property, like a cow, like something he could mark and sell. Her voice broke slightly, but she kept going. Mr. Thorne found me in a blizzard. I was dying. He didn't have to help me. He didn't know me, but he did, and he's been protecting me ever since, even when it cost him everything. She looked at me then, her eyes were wet, but clear as he taught me I'm worth more than a piece of paper. That I'm real even without the deed. That I matter. She turned back to the crowd. I'm asking you, please don't send me back. Please. The silence that followed was heavy and complete. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then the preacher spoke. Well, put it to a vote. All in favor of granting temporary guardianship to Elias Thorne until Lee reaches her majority say aye. The blacksmith's voice came first loud and clear. I then Agnes. I Doc Mills. I'd one by one voices rose from the crowd. Not all of them. Some stayed silent, afraid of crossing Harlan or afraid of upending the order of things, but enough. More than enough. When the count finished, it was 14-6. The preacher nodded. Then it settled. Elias Thorne is granted temporary guardianship until Lyra Blackwood reaches age 12 and can claim her inheritance. He looked at Harlan. As for you, Deputy Langford will be taking you into custody pending investigation of the bank records. Harlan's face twisted. For a moment, I thought he might run or fight, but then something inside him collapsed. He just stood there, shoulders sagging, all the fight gone out of him. I needed the money, he said quietly. My daughter died. The medical bills, I couldn't cover them. I was going to pay it back. I swear I was going to. You branded a child, Agnes said. Her voice was hard as iron. Whatever debt you had, you paid it on to her, and that ain't forgivable. Deputy Langford took Harlan by the arm. Come on, we'll sort this out proper. As they walked away, Harlan looked back once at Lee. I don't know what he saw in her face. Forgiveness, maybe. Or just the cold finality of judgment. Either way, he turned and didn't look back again. The crowd began to break up, folks talking in low voices as they drifted toward their wagons and horses. Agnes came over and put her hand on my shoulder. You got your ranch back, she said. Harlan's bank will be seized by the territory. Your debt's voided. How do you know about the ledgers? I asked. She smiled, tired, but satisfied. I told you nobody pays attention to old women, and old women pay attention to everything. She looked at Lee. You did good, child. Took real courage to speak up like that. Lee nodded but didn't speak. She was trembling now, the adrenaline wearing off and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Doc Mills approached, his medical bag in hand. Let me check you both over. You've been through hell. We're all right, I said, humor an old doctor. We sat on the church steps while he checked Lee's pulse and looked at her eyes. The sun was warm now, the sky that perfect blue that only comes in late spring. The smell of prairie grass and distant rain hung in the air. Somewhere a meadowlark sang. You know what happens now? Doc asked. We go home, I said. Fix what's broken. Plant a garden, live, he smiled. Sounds like a plan. We rode back to the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon. The red ribbon still fluttered on the surveyor's stake, but it didn't matter anymore. The land was ours again. The cabin stood solid and waiting. When we got inside, Lee set the oilskin pouch on the shelf. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she turned to me. Can I call you Pa? She asked. I couldn't speak for a moment, just nodded. She threw her arms around me and held on tight. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwoods. Spring was coming, the mud would dry, the grass would green, and we would heal. 2 weeks later, we burned the branding iron. Agnes had suggested it, said symbols matter, and this one needed putting to rest. So on a Sunday morning, clear and warm, we rode into town with the iron wrapped in burlap. The church was full for service, and afterward folks lingered on the steps talking and trading news the way they do when winter finally breaks. The preacher met us at the door. He'd agreed to let us use the church stove for what Agnes was calling a ritual of closure. Fancy words for destroying the thing that had marked Lyra like cattle. Inside, the church smelled of old wood and candle wax. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting the floor in gold. Doc Mills was there, and Agnes and a handful of others who'd voted for us. Even Deputy Langford showed up, standing quietly in the back. I unwrapped the iron. The metal was cold and heavy, the B still visible on the brand end. Lee stood beside me, her hand in mine. She'd asked to be the one to put it in the fire. "You sure?" I asked. She nodded. The preacher opened the stove door. The fire inside burned hot and clean, fed with dry pine. Lee took the iron from me. Her hands didn't shake. She walked to the stove and thrust the brand into the flames. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the metal began to glow. First red, then orange, then white. The B softened and warped, the shape losing definition until it was just molten metal and heat. "May it never mark another soul," the preacher said quietly. We stood there until the iron was nothing but slag. Then Agnes stepped forward and rang the church bell. Not the alarm peal from before, but a slow, steady toll. A sound of ending and beginning both. When the bell stopped, Lee turned to me. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah," I said. "We can go home." That afternoon, we planted a garden. The ground was soft from spring rain, rich and dark. Lee had never planted anything before, so I showed her how to space the seeds, how deep to set them, how to cover them gentle and give them room to grow. We planted beans and corn and squash. The three sisters, like the old-timers called them. We planted wild flowers, too, along the edge where the fence met the open prairie. Lee chose the spot right where I'd found her that February night, collapsed in the snow. "So something beautiful grows here," she said. We worked until the sun began to sink. Our hands were dirty, our backs sore, but it was good work, the kind that makes you tired in a way that feels like accomplishment. That evening, Agnes came by with a basket of food, bread and cheese, and dried apples. She sat with us by the fire while we ate, and we talked about small things, the weather, the garden, the way the grass was coming in green after the long winter. Deputy told me they're transferring Harlan to the territorial prison in Lamy. Agnes said, 5 years for embezzlement. Could have been worse. Could have been better, I said. Could have. She looked at Lee. "You ever think about forgiving him?" Lee was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I think about it, but I'm not there yet. Maybe someday." Agnes nodded. "That's honest. Forgiveness ain't something you do because you're supposed to. It's something you do when you're ready. Or not at all. Either way is all right." After Agnes left, Lee and I sat outside on the porch steps. The stars were coming out, sharp and bright in the clear sky. A nighthawk called somewhere in the distance. The air smelled of fresh turned earth and pine. "You ever miss her?" Lee asked. "Eliza, every day." "Does it get easier?" "Not easier, different." I looked up at the stars. "You learn to carry it. Learn that loving someone doesn't end just because they're gone. It just changes shape." She leaned against my shoulder. We sat like that for a while, not talking, just being. A father and daughter under the wide Wyoming sky. "Pa," she said finally. "Yeah, thank you for not giving up." Thank you for not letting me. In July, Lyra turned 12. We rode into town to file the papers that made her inheritance official. 300 head of cattle, 200 acres of grazing land, and water rights to the creek that ran through it. The land office clerk processed everything without comment, stamped the documents, and handed them over. "Congratulations, Miss Blackwood," he said. "You're a property owner." She folded the papers carefully and put them in the oilskin pouch. But this time when we left, she didn't clutch them like they were the only proof she existed. She just tucked them in her saddlebag and smiled. "Feels different now," she said. "How so?" "Before the paper was all I had. Now it's just paper. I'm real whether I got it or not." We rode home through the summer heat. The garden had come in full. Beans climbing their poles, corn tasseling, squash sprawling across the ground. The wildflowers bloomed in a riot of color where the snow had once been deep and cold. That night, we had a quiet celebration, just the two of us, a good meal, and the sound of the creek running clear and strong. After supper, Lyra pulled the McGuffey's reader from the shelf and read aloud by lamplight. Her voice was steady and sure, the words flowing easy. When she finished, she closed the book and looked at me. "What do we do tomorrow?" "Same as today," I said. "We live, we work, we take care of each other." "Sounds good to me." She smiled then, a real smile, full and unguarded. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her smile like that. Maybe never. Outside, the night settled in soft and warm. The horses drowsed in the corral. The garden grew in the dark. And somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its evening song. We were home. Finally, truly home. 5 years on. I'm writing this from the porch of the cabin Lee and I built together. The old one's still standing, but we added on a room for her, a workshop for me, a proper kitchen. The garden's bigger now, and we keep chickens and a milk cow. The 3 sisters come up every spring without fail. Lyra's 17 now, tall and strong with her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness. She manages her ranch herself, rides the fence lines, haggles with buyers in town. Folks respect her. Some even fear her a little. The way you fear someone who survived what should have killed them and came out harder for it. She still lives here with me, though her own land's just 5 miles west. Says she'll build there someday when she's ready. For now, she likes the company. So do I. We heard Harlan died last winter in the territorial prison. Pneumonia. Lyra took the news quiet. Didn't say much. That night, though, I found her standing in the garden where we'd planted the wild flowers. She stood there a long time, hands in her pockets, looking at the stars. "You all right?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "I thought I'd feel something. Relief maybe or anger, but I just feel tired." "That's grief," I said. "Even for people who hurt us," she nodded. We stood together in the darkness, listening to the night sounds, crickets and distant coyotes, and the wind moving through the grass. People ask me sometimes why I risked everything for a child that wasn't mine by blood. I tell them what I told Lee that first week. She was mine the second she asked if she was real. And I've been answering that question every day since. With a roof, a fire, and a name she chose to keep. Family ain't the name on a paper. It's who you'd walk through a blizzard for. And I'd walk through 1,000 blizzards for her? The meadowlark sings at dawn now, right where I found her all those years ago. Every morning its song reminds me winter don't last forever. Spring always comes.